Now, having said that then, let's put some key indicators on when expectations are not working for you, because expectations should work for you. But when they fail, when my expectations are my enemy, what are some indicators that they aren't working? One of them is that there's a failure in the bell curve. Now, if you look at what we expect of our company or ourselves, there's always a bell curve of, what we would call low stress, high stress, and what I call functional stress. Bell curve: low stress, high stress, functional stress. Your goals. What's the sweet spot for your goals? Which one of these positions of the bell curve in an ideal world should your goals be in? The functional stress. In other words, low stress means we're not shooting high enough and we're either lazy or complacent or kind of like we're not pushing ourselves. We're in a comfort zone here. And this isn't a good place to be. As you know in business, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards, so this could be a problem. High stress is when we're burning up the engine above 7,000 RPM and people are burning out and we're burning out and bad things are happening. Functional stress is when it's not comfortable, but we're meeting the challenges. When this begins to fail, and it tends to fail on this side in business, that's a sign that your expectations aren't working. So first, look at your bell curve and see where the stress levels are. The second one is a little more personal, a little on the deeper side. It's when perfection becomes a demand, not a goal. When perfection is in your head, you being the CEO, is a demand and not a goal. Now, who can tell me the difference between a demand and a goal? They're not the same thing. But if you're a perfectionist, you don't want to raise your hand because you're afraid you'll fail. So why am I even talking to you guys? Because nobody's going to say anything. Because no, there's a difference, right?
I guess a goal would be something that you can realistically strive for, where demand is not based in reality. It's just an expectation based on no metrics.
Yeah. In essence, a demand is if I don't reach it, I'm not okay. A goal is if I don't reach it, I'm still okay. Like Paul talks about in Philippians 3. He talks about his life in Christ, and he says, I strive toward the goal of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Not that I have attained it yet, but I still strive for it. In other words, I've got goals, and we all need to have stretch goals, personally, professionally, and all that. That's uncomfortable. That's a good uncomfortable, but I know I'm okay if I don't reach them. Well, the demand is something's wrong with me, and I'm not okay. I'm not acceptable. I'm not safe. I'm not loved. I don't live in grace. I'm sort of in a judged, condemned state. And when this is in your head and your organization's head, you've got problems. Because as the research says, the only way people become creative and take creative risk is they feel free to fail. And the freedom to fail is where all great ideas come from. And people don't have any wiggle room, or you don't have any wiggle room in your head, you're going to have sort of a lot of linear thinking that in today's paradigm is not working. The book I wrote, Leadership Beyond Reason, a lot of you guys have that. It talks about how today's CEO needs to work not with half a brain, but with a full brain. And we've got a lot of training on the left side: mission, vision, strategy, tactics, goals. But, kind of your Wharton Business School, Stanford Business School, Harvard Business School kind of mentality. We need that. But there's underdevelopment on the right side: creativity, passion, resonance, emotionality, those sorts of things. And we need both sides. If perfection is the demand, you stay in the left side because it's safer. So that's a sign that the expectations aren't working. Another one is our old friend, negative self-talk. If you find yourself having interesting conversations with you, that doesn't mean you're multiple personality, by the way. We all do this. That's a different diagnosis. It's a sign that expectations aren't working. Those of you who have ever struggled with perfectionism, what are some of the nurturant things you say to yourself when you screw up? What are some of the affirming, kind of helpful things that... You jerk. I love you jerk. It's just simple. It's to the point. You jerk. What else?
It's their fault.
It's their fault. Actually, that's an interesting one because that's not a perfectionist one. That is a, I'll move the judgment outside of me onto them one. Yeah. Which is,
I'm perfect.
yeah.
Could be my fault.
There's our first perfect CEO. I just want you to watch this. No. Very common. It's like, it gets me away from the wrath that I bestow on myself. Okay, what else? What other things do you find yourself saying to yourself after you really blow it? Stupid. Stupid.
Not qualified.
Huh?
Not qualified.
I'm not qualified. I should be put on the bench. How about the, well, you'll never get it? I love that one. And then there's the, look how you're letting everybody down. I'm talking about guilt tomorrow morning, but there are a lot of shadings of similarities between those. How many of you ever struggled with negative self-talk? It's kind of like endemic to the CEO. That's another sign the expectation is not working. And finally, your people, your direct reports, you'll find that you are running around a bunch of very discouraged people. Like you said earlier, when my expectations of myself are unrealistic and I don't have a lot of wiggle room, I generally put them onto other people, and people just kind of give up. And what they'll do is they'll either hide or play it safe or play cover myself or whatever, but if they don't feel like there's room between good enough and excellent and perfect, they just kind of give up, check out. They just show up, and that's not what we need. So, hopefully I've got you depressed enough to listen to the next part of this. Somebody was talking to Henry Cloud, my writing partner, and myself years ago. We've been speaking at some venue. And a guy came up, he was in business, he said, I've been listening to everybody. I've been listening to all the other speakers in the country and listening to you guys. And I finally found out what's different about you guys. And we said, that'd be nice, we don't know. And he said, everybody else is into winning, you guys are into losing. I thought, in a really sick way, I think you're right. But we believe that if you understand losing, then you'll win. But if you skirt losing, you'll never win. So it's kind of like the old pastors used to tell me back in the South, if you can tolerate a Friday crucifixion, you'll get a Sunday resurrection. So let's get through the crucifixion, then we'll get the resurrection. Okay, I want to talk about the drivers, why we have these unrealistic expectations that don't work, and why we do the kind of like too harsh things to ourselves. And it all starts theologically with a three-letter word that starts with S and ends with N. So can anybody guess? I know there's a lot of theologically astute people here. Not Sam.
I like to buy a vowel.
Are you going to call a friend?
$50.
It's sin. Now, sin is variously described in the Bible as missing the mark or going our own way or rebellion or whatever, but the world's broken because of that. And there was kind of a break in the universe when sin hit. And one of the things it did among many, one of the effects of sin that's irrelevant to the CEO, is that it caused what we call a gap inside me. And the gap was a distance or a space in my head and in your head between the real me and the ideal me. The person I really am versus the person I would want to be. Because before the fall, these were all together. I was sort of like who I was going to be. I was perfect, and Adam and Eve had love and relationship and a task and goals and missions and spirituality and all that. Real and ideal were together. There was no gap. But now there's a gap. Let me ask you a question. As a CEO and just as a Christian, as a person, name some of the things you aspire to be, that you would like to be, that you're not yet but are good things, because we all need aspirations. I would like to be more X.
Patient.
I like to be more patient.
Compassion.
More compassion for people.
Pastoral.
Have more pastoral sort of empathic tendencies. Shepherding. What else?
More influencing someone to good.
Better able to push them toward the good than other places. It's a lot of these. It's probably, you probably dream about the person you would like to be, and that's good, because we're supposed to dream dreams. We're supposed to want that. And then there's real me. What's some things in the real me that I'm not really crazy about, but they are? Pride. I get critical. Greed. Self-centeredness. All about me, blah, blah, blah. We have this gap. How many of you are aware and can, not just theologically, but in your heart, in your feelings, in your experience, you experience the discomfort of the gap? You feel this, what I'm talking about? Okay, 4 of you. Great. The rest of you, I want you to start feeling bad because you need to feel bad. This gap was not invented by God. This gap occurred because of some bad things that happened. And so all of us have this tension inside of us like, I'm not who I want to be, and it's not okay, and I wish I was better, but, you know, like Romans 7 says, the person I would like to be, I'm not. I do the things I don't want to do, and what else? I don't do the things I would like to do. There's the gap. So what happens is we see this discomfort of this gap inside, not only in us, but in our organizations. And we go through several sort of stages on how we deal with it. And I want to go over this with you because CEOs do this, and I'll kind of talk about the ones that CEOs struggle with the most. But there's different ways, kind of like non-working ways, that keep us kind of anesthetized from the pain of the gap. The first one is we deny it. I don't have a gap. I am okay, you're okay, aren't you lucky to be around me? Have you ever worked with someone who could not admit they had a problem? Ever tried to be the boss of someone who couldn't admit they had a problem? What was the experience like with somebody who could not see that gap in themselves at all? What was it like? What fruit did it bear in the organization? Frustration. I got frustrated. I got mad. I couldn't build trust. And we do this with ourselves sometimes, like, you know, I just won't think about this. But the problem is that reality is always bigger than I am. And sooner or later, it's going to become evident in my family, in my marriage, in my dating life. By the way, you should never do both of those at the same time. I found that it just doesn't work, and so I'd like you to have that principle. In your career, in your spiritual life, the gap is going to manifest itself because it's part of reality. It's sort of like saying, I'm a surfer and I don't like waves. The waves are going to win. The gap's going to win. So denial doesn't work. So the next thing we do is we go to man's number one way to fix this, good old-fashioned willpower. I'll just work harder. I'll be more disciplined. I'll be more strategic, and I'll be more effective, and I'll get up early in the morning, and I'll work out, and I'll never eat an Oreo again, and, you know, whatever, but I'll kind of go to the trying harder modality. And CEOs are really vulnerable to this because you tend to be high-capacity people anyway. Working hard works for you, so you tend to depend on that. Well, you know what the Bible says about the helpfulness of willpower? It says it has limited help in Colossians. It says it's good for a few things, but here's the problem. Willpower never transformed anybody. Willpower is a good servant, but it never transformed anybody, and it never fixed this. And the high expectation, perfectionistic CEO is doomed to kind of fail here. I'll prove this. Have you ever, what do you do on like January 1st or 2nd? What's the thing we always do? We make a little list and it's called New Year's resolutions, okay? Name some New Year's resolutions that we are: lose weight, work out more, have a quiet time, walk my dog, you know, whatever. What's your average tenure of life of your New Year's resolutions?
3 months.
3 months? Couple days? But sooner or later, it just gives out because there's something in us that just kind of can't do it. Basically, if willpower worked, the Bible would have ended at Exodus 20. Does anybody know what I'm talking about, or am I just totally being too weird? What happened in Exodus 20? Ten Commandments. And if willpower worked, it would have been, okay, there's the rules. Have a nice life, guys. I'm out of here. Bye. And actually, the Bible's a pretty fat book because God had to spend a lot of time with redeeming a race that could not do it with willpower. So willpower falls. So all of our discipline, trying harder, I'll get up earlier, I'll be more effective, be more efficient. And I'm into all that stuff too. I mean, my iPhone's got all kinds of utilities for being more efficient. But they don't solve the gap. All right? So then we go to another stage. And it has to do with, it's kind of a dual problem. There is what I call the protest judgment stage. Protest/judgment. Protest judgment. So I can't deny that I'm not perfect. I can't willpower my way out of it. So now what happens is I do one of two things. Either I protest about the way the world is and it's not a fair place, and I get stuck in what we call in psychology the protest mode. And I'm always upset about the injustices in the world and how hard I try, and look at what happened in, innocent people being hurt, and I'm a good guy, and why am I suffering when the bad guys... Anybody ever read a book in the Bible about why the righteous suffer? Who said that? Starts with a J, ends with a B. Job. See, I knew that you guys were theologues. Job was into I'm trying so hard here, but I'm feeling protest because things aren't working like they should. The other flip side of it is, instead of being protesting against how bad everything is, I beat myself up. This is that negative, where the source of the negative self-talk we talked about earlier, where I whip myself and say, what a loser, and all these sorts of things. Either way, it's the same dynamic, just one's pointing outwards, one's pointing inwards. Some of us are mad at the world for not being fair, and we can't get over it. Some of us are mad at ourselves for not being perfect, and we can't get over it. Same problem. It's a way of judgment. You know what we found out? Those of you that are really harsh on yourselves, behavior in organizations and kind of like churches or just any kind of organization, performance will increase temporarily with judgment. It really does. Why is that? Guilt. People get scared. You get scared. It's sort of like if you beat the horse enough, he'll sort of get up for a while, but in the long term, it's destined to fail. So it doesn't work, but we still go through this. I've got a friend, a CEO, who has been stuck in protest mode until we unearthed it. What he couldn't figure out was he spent his whole life building a business, and then he had a partner who did some bad ethical stuff, and he lost millions. It was really bad. And that would have been a normal sort of I hate this is bad, and then kind of a letting go, and he couldn't let it go. And it was always, I can't sleep at night. All I can think about is what the guy did, how he screwed me. It was unfair. Why did God let it happen? Why didn't any of my friends notice? And I had a lot of empathy for that, because you build something for 20 years and then this kind of happens. And I finally said, you're kind of in danger of doing this the rest of your life. And he said, what do you mean? I said, the protest mode is a psychological dynamic that looks for a context. It searches for something to attach to. And if you don't work this out, after the business is okay, you'll put it into your marriage. And after that's okay, you'll put it into Haiti. And after that's okay, you'll put it into the poor. And after that's okay, you'll put it into why did I get sick? And you see what I'm saying? It's inside us looking for a context of reality to say, this isn't right, this isn't fair. And you might know people like that. That every time you have a lunch with them at Starbucks, it's always the next thing that's wrong and why it's so unfair and how could it be. They're stuck in a protest mode, and they're in danger of kind of wasting their life. But it's very common. Okay? How many of you are familiar with this protest dynamic? You've seen it. Okay. So we go through that, and then the last stage of this is we go into despair. And despair says, give it up. I can't be good enough. I can't force myself to be better. I can't even argue myself, and I can't blame other people. I'm just not who I should be. Forget it. I'm not going to play the game anymore. And this is when we have the classic middle-aged crazies, where we just kind of say, forget the rules, and people kind of go nuts for a while. I do a couple of things. I have a leadership coaching program in Newport Beach where I work with CEOs and people in different various aspects on a holistic level. And also, we have a one-week Ultimate Leadership Intensive that a lot of you guys have gone to in Laguna. And I was teaching one of these one time, was talking about this whole issue of like the despair part. And I said, for example, some people will just, I can't be good enough, and so you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go buy the red convertible and get a gold necklace. Kind of making a joke about, you know, middle-aged crazies. And a guy in the back goes, I just did that. Do I have a problem? And I went, I don't know, tell me. He goes, well, I just, you know, I'm 47, I'm not where I wanted to be yet, and I tried to try hard, it's not working, and I tried to act like it wasn't true, and I've been mad at myself, and I just went, forget it. And so ever since I've been at the conference, I've been on the phone negotiating for like a red convertible. Is that a problem? And I went, could you do me a favor? Could you wait until like this lesson's over before you like close the deal? He said, okay. So I saw him a couple of days later. I said, how are you doing? He says, I'm a lot better. I said, what happened? He says, well, my wife was freaking out because, you know, she saw the gold chain and she saw the red convertible. How many of you guys have a red convertible? I don't want to. But he said, but I understood the answer to the lesson, and so I got something a little more normal. And he said, I'm feeling a lot better now. But it's kind of a normal dynamic just to say, forget it. There's something good about this despair, though. Despair is a blessing from God for the CEO, because despair means I know there's only one more direction to go. And that direction is to grace. I can't do it. I can't be perfect. No matter how much I beat myself up, I'm letting myself down. My organization's letting me down. There's the gap all over. Who's going to save me from the body of this death? And it forces us to grace. And so many of us have to go through despair to get to the grace. Yes, sir?
John, could you elaborate on that? What happens between despair and grace when you hit out-and-out depression? And now we're talking psychiatrists and free antidepressants and can't go to sleep at night, and marriage is now being redefined, and now this person feels they could lose everything, and yet it's kind of this free fall, and they don't know what to do.
Yeah, there's several kinds of depression.
There's something beyond despair. That kind of scenario.
There are several kinds of depressions, and the kind you're talking about, that depression tends to be untreated despair.
I'm sorry, untreated?
Yeah. Like it went on, and I kept trying, and I didn't go get the resources I need, and then my brain chemistry starts changing, and the neurons stop firing right, and the neural grooves stop working like they should, and I become more isolated, and then I lose functionality, and then my relationships start breaking down. And it's because I didn't know enough or didn't feel safe enough to say, red, tilt, white flag, and go get help. And so the longer the despair goes, the greater the chances for clinical depression. So, and in that case, more is better. That's when a person's got to pull in the troops and get every kind of resource, from pastoral to clinical to medical to on. Okay. Okay, so now we're all in despair, so our situation even got worse. So now let's get the good news. You guys were really nice about waiting. There are some solutions and skills that God provides for, back to our original topic, the high expectation or unrealistic expectation CEO. And the basic solutions or skills are two. One is a thing called grief, and the other is a thing called adaptation. Grief and adaptation are your best friends. Now, this is a hard sell to a bunch of CEOs. Adaptation, not so much. Everybody knows you got to be agile and nimble and sort of thing. But to tell you guys that it's a good thing to grieve is a hard, hard sell. Tell me what your gut says about the word grief as a CEO. Do you think, hallelujah, of course, I can't wait to do this, this is great? No, not unless you need lots of meds. What is it that's counterintuitive about grief for a CEO? Loss of control is huge. It seems like inaction. I'm going backwards instead of charging the hill, right? What else?
Weakness.
Huh?
Weakness.
Weakness, it connotes weakness, confusion, and and we have to have clarity, as Marcus Buckingham would say, instead of confusion. So, sets me back there. Giving up. Well, all that's true. But if you can learn the skill of grief, it is temporary. It becomes part of your core competencies, what I would call your, you've got your skill competencies like the stuff I talked about last night, your task competencies, but you've also got to have your character competencies, and if you can learn the skill of grief, it'll be temporarily, you'll go in it, you'll come out of it, and you'll be done. But you've got to learn this. And when you learn this, it frees you up for a number of reasons. So let me kind of go into that. The function of grief is basically to let go and of what I cannot keep, to allow in the new. See, grief has a reason. God created grief as a reason. It helps us to let go of something we cannot have or cannot keep to allow in something new. It's sort of like, when you reboot your computer or you do a defrag or whatever you do, and you got to clear out all the yunky RAM stuff that's like getting in the way. It's clearing all that out so that you can allow new stuff in. Grief has a function and a purpose that's designed by God to allow new things in us. What are some things that we lose in the CEO world on a personal or professional level that you can't get back? Now, if you say, I can get anything back, I'm a winner, I'm sorry, you're psychotic. Nobody wins every time. So what are the things we have to say, I lost?
Time.
I lose time, like in a wrong direction maybe. Good, what else? I lose some relationships where I wanted someone and they didn't want me, and no matter what I tried, it took two to tango and they didn't want me and I lost. What else? Resources that can't come back. Money. Trust. Esteem. How about opportunities? In business, windows open, and if you go in, you might get it, and if you don't go in, there's a timing aspect. Windows closed, there's some things you will never go back to. And I would love to say, no, it's like the Hollywood romantic comedies. It'll always come back. It doesn't come back. Hollywood's wrong there. And there's some reality we have to say, I'll never have this again. And God says, I don't want you to be stuck in a state of perpetual loss where you're always longing for, dreaming for, wondering when, wishing. He doesn't want us in that state. He wants us to clear out the pipes to allow the new in. I will redeem the years the locusts have taken away from you. So grief has a function and a purpose. I study the different aspects of psychological functioning, and there's some really cool stuff going on, like at UCLA and places like that. They're studying neurobiology and how all the stuff we deal with, and this is for business people as well as just non-business people, but the stuff we deal with, there's a lot of neurological aspects to it. And what they did is they started studying people that had massive loss that had PTSD. Is anybody familiar with PTSD? Post-traumatic stress disorder. They started studying in World War II. They really studied a lot in Vietnam. They studied in 911, Desert Storm people. And they got lots and lots of data. And some of you guys are traumatized, so pay attention, because this happens to all of us. What they found out is that if somebody had a loss, a loved one or a money loss or an opportunity loss, that the way the brain works, here's your brain on drugs, no, not really, that here is what we call today. I'm thinking about what's happening to me today, and there's a loss. And the normal way that the losses should happen is we go, oh well, that's sad, let it go. And it goes down what we call the neural grooves, and it goes into a bank here called memory. So, memory is where I learn. Okay, don't invest in that place again. That's a bad sector. This person's got bad, got bad mojo, or they're deceptive, or this money is a bad place to go for, or whatever. But memory is where I learn from my mistakes, and I use that. I never want to forget my mistakes, right? They're helpful for me not to know where to go again. But they found out that people had massive losses, that this kind of groove right here, that there was a bottleneck. And we all know what bottlenecks are. And people could not go from a lost today into memory. They were stuck. And what they found out was they were like, it was always in their minds. And if you found yourself staying up at night thinking, why didn't I do it differently? I'm such an idiot. Why don't they respond to me? I'm trying so hard. Why? If you're stuck in that kind of obsessional, beating my head against it, I can't let it go, you're in the same position. What they found out was if people began to go into the grief process, it erased the bottleneck. And they began to have tears and let go of things, and things moved into memory. And here's the advantage. What was in today in my mind now becomes yesterday. And yesterday's a good thing. So then they could say, it doesn't bother me anymore. It's part of my life, it's part of my narrative, it's part of my history. You know, it's me, but I'm not sitting here worrying and obsessing and beating myself up or wondering why. It's part of something I can use to learn to make good opportunities and good decisions again. And I've always thought it was cool that the neurobiology is supporting what the Bible's been teaching about the process of grief. We have a man who was acquainted with sorrows, well acquainted with grief. It talks about Jesus in Isaiah, that he was a griever. In fact, in Jeremiah chapter 9, it says that there were the wailing women, that there was an entire industry of women in Israel whose career was to lead the nation in how to grieve. Ever watch CNN or Fox and watch somebody grieve? What do they look like? What do they do?
Dramatic.
They're dramatic. What else?
Cry.
Huh?
Cry.
They cry. They're physical. They beat their chest. It's a physical thing. How do we do it in the West?
Happy hour.
Happy hour. I want to go to his church. What else?
Hold it in.
Hold it in. Sanitize it, right?
Just keep going.
Keep going. Let it go. I called my mother a few years ago. She's like a classic Southern lady. And one of her sisters had died. One of my favorite aunts had died. And I was like kind of distraught because I love Dorothy. And I called my mother up and said, I don't know what to say. She's my aunt, but she's your sister. I'm so sorry. And she goes, well, you got to move on. I was like, what? But that's kind of like the whole Western mentality. So we've got all these ungrieved losses inside us taking up the RAM we can never allow in the new. Yes, sir?
This looks like forgiveness, too.
If I had a coin to toss right now, I'd say the forgiveness is on the top of it, which is the cognitive aspect of canceling a debt, and grief is the emotional aspect, which is letting go. They cannot be separated. You're absolutely right. One says, I'm canceling a legal debt. The other says, there are corresponding feelings to go with this. Yes. So, let me talk a little bit then about taking you through the process. How do you become good grievers as CEOs and get over the I'm setting myself backwards? Well, I'm not saying you do this in a boardroom. You don't sit back with the direct reports and do this. But you better find a safe place like we talked about last night, where someone can go there with you and weep with those who weep and mourn with those who mourn. And gals, y'all are ahead of us on this, and guys, we need to catch up. And the guys I know that are good grievers, they jump into it and it's intense and they pull back. They're fine. And they go through life. And there tend to be two kinds of griefs. There's old griefs and there's existential griefs. The old griefs are the stuff that I've just been holding on to. And I just don't want to think about it. And you may have to go through a season, there may be a childhood grief that you never let go of. Maybe childhood wasn't what it should have been. You got to say goodbye and feel sad. Jump into it. Jump in the ocean and get it done. Or there may be a relationship from the past or some old loss or some old hurt that you've got to jump into. And then there's today's existential kind of maintenance grief. And that's just the ability to say, that was hard, I feel sad, and let it go. Now, let me take you through some of the skills for this. One of those is to say the words, I lost. I've got a CEO friend of mine in my coaching program. He and I have had extensive arguments about this. I'm not going to say that. We're winners in Christ. We never lose. And if they don't like me, they're the losers. And I'm going, great. Tell me when you're done with your blood pressure medication. I'll be glad to. Because we lose sometimes. Sometimes we lose people that don't want to care about us, or we lose opportunities, and reality is to go, I affirm reality. Stop fighting reality. Now, if it's not a loss yet, if you got a Hail Mary pass, hang on. If there's still a chance, hang on. But once the door is closed and it's not going to come back, you must say, I lost. Otherwise, it will stay in you and haunt you and drive you crazy forever. I lost is a good thing for a CEO to have and say. The second thing is to write a value statement. Let me explain a value statement. A value statement is when you write down what it is you loved about that person, place, or thing. What you really wanted. I wanted that marriage, and I wanted a great connection and intimacy and partnership and travel and meaning and ministry. I really wanted that. Or I wanted to get this deal. There was an M&A that happened, and the M&A didn't happen, and now I really wanted to expand my horizons and have a new sector, a new region. It didn't happen. I wanted that. Let me tell you why a value statement is important. Because if you don't really feel what you value about something, you'll never grieve it. You know what we tend to do? We devalue, so we won't feel bad. I'll give you a great example. The Starbucks conversation. There's a lot of counseling that goes on at Starbucks, right? Yes. And, you'll be in there and you'll watch, Mindy and Sally talking to each other, and Sally goes, well, Sam and I aren't dating anymore. And she'll go, I'm so glad you said that. I was wondering, because he doesn't deserve you. You are an angel and he's a devil. And you're just better, just flush him down the toilet. You're so lucky. And, she devalues all these things about Sam, and then she feels still pretty good, like, gosh, yeah, you're right, I can do a lot better, And she's got her little Prozac hit for about 4 hours, and she feels good. What happens about 4 hours later once they're out done with Starbucks and she's back at work? She starts missing him again. Why? Because she only grieved the bad parts. You've got to grieve the good parts. And it's kind of a humbling thing to say, I wanted that jerk because he had a nice smile, or she had great teeth, or whatever. And they had no character, but I love the fact that, we both like the same music or whatever. But you've got to say, here's what I miss about that. Our tendency is to go, I didn't want any of the package. It was no good for me. Don't do it. That's half a grief. God wants you to have a full grief. You grieve the good aspects of it and the bad aspects of it. And watch the tendency we have to say, oh, forget about it. You didn't need that anyway. You did. You did need it. And if you grieve what you needed, you're free. Second part, now that you've done these, and there's an order to this, is now allow sad feelings. Because once you say I lost and I really wanted this to happen, and you've admitted that and you've been humble and reality-based enough, sad feelings are going to come up. God made you that way. And you're going to feel it. And I'm a real big boo-hooer. I don't do it all the time, but you take me to a romantic comedy, my wife drags me, I'm there. And I just make her watch Bruce Willis movies with me. But you have to allow the sad feelings to come. Now, this is very, very hard for high-end, high-capacity business types because it makes us feel like, again, we're not taking the hill, we're not moving forward. But remember what you're doing is if I allow this to happen, I'm clearing out the pipes for new opportunities for God. Okay? But then, you must receive comfort and support. You're going to have to be humble enough, and this is why I love Convene. You guys have the correct DNA because you believe in people talking about losses and getting past them with support. You've got to have somebody who says, tell me more about it. This is tough for you. I want to hear about it. And you know why that's true? There's an old proverb that says, a grief alone is doubled. A grief shared is cut in half. Grief alone, when you're isolated in your closet all by yourself, you'll double the time. I found that kind of true clinically. You'll double the time you've got to let go of something. If you want half the time, and if you're into efficiency and good analytics, you get the comfort because they're putting grace back into you and you'll feel better sooner. So that's why comfort's so important. I'm no ophthalmologist, but I have ophthalmological type people who say that The function of tears is to let out toxins and poisons that we don't need. And when you think about that, tears are like saying, you don't need this stuff, get rid of it. And think about what God would do to create eyeball-to-eyeball contact with us and another person who moves in and says, I'm sorry, tell me about it. I want to hear about it. It's sort of like their eye contact is pulling out the toxins that we're having to let go of. This is not the time for the cheerleaders in your life. The ones that go, well, remember Romans 8:28, it's not that bad, have perspective. You're seated in the heavenlies with Christ. I always go, I know those verses. Can I have them later? I need somebody who can weep with those who weep and mourn with those who mourn. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5 says, a man's heart are like deep waters, and a person of understanding draws him out. You get those people, and the cheerleaders come second. But the first thing is the people who can really go there and not afraid to go to the deep waters with you. Because if they go there with you, you will get out sooner. If they don't go there with you, you'll stay there longer because you're all alone and by yourself. That's why that's why I love the Convene groups. Because that's what happens in the Convene groups, is people feel free to say, I got to feel bad about something that was a bad thing, and people move in and they don't say, forget about it, cheer up, you've got a bad perspective, you're a whiner. They go, tell me about it. And they come out because they were not alone there. Very, very important. All right. And then just a couple of words about adaptation, because we all need that nimble part too. Adaptation is basically saying, I'm giving up the desire to make reality bend its knee to me. I think I'll bend my knee to reality, which is always a good place to be. Because when we don't adapt, we're saying, I'm going to beat my head against the wall until reality changes. And I just end up with a headache, right? So there's a couple of keys to that. Give up. Here's a psychological term. The idealization of what was lost. Let me explain this. Give up the idealization of what was lost. If you have an opportunity or a business thing or a relationship or a person, there's a tendency in all of us, it's like a little kid, to say when they go away, I'll never get it back again. It'll never be the same. It'll never be good enough. I will always be in a state of perpetual loss. And that's just a very early thing that all of us do. It's called idealization. It's saying, I won't take in any new opportunities or people or things because I so much miss this. When we realize that nobody's totally indispensable, that God will bring in new things, maybe not the things I wanted, maybe not the opportunity or the people, but His way, then I'm more open. But we have to go through you know what, there's other ways to meet my need, there's other ways for me to be happy than my original track. So that's what helps us adapt. Secondly, find new ways to operate. This is a time when you've lost something to think, I got to take a different path. Maybe I'm in the wrong sector. You know, how many friends have I got in real estate? I'm in Orange County, right? Who now are into the distressed home thing. They found a different way to operate. They gave up, a dream that they'd had for 18 years, and now they're going. They flipped the model and they're doing something else. But it wasn't what they had chosen. But they're doing fine. Not like they were, but a lot better than they could have. They found another way to operate. Letting go and adaptation helps you do that. And the third, move on. Once you've done the grief work, move on. Make new decisions, get new energy, try new things. Let me finish with 3 little phrases, because I always like to give CEOs simple things, because we're all busy people. 3 phrases that you can use to help you let go of stuff. The first one is to begin to say, it is what it is. I lost the deal. I know, that's sad. It is what it is. That person's a key person, and now they're hanging their shingle across the street. What do you say? It is what it is. I'll deal with it. It is what it is. The second one is good enough. Like you said, Bob, we're developing good enough. We don't have to be hitting the numbers every time. We've got a good enough gear in our head. And the third one is a little more technical and sort of theological and philosophical. And I'll try to explain this because it's very complicated, but help me if I make sense. It's called oh well. Oh well. Like, I'm leaving the house and I'm going to a board meeting and I'm already leaving 12 minutes late. So they're going to be 12 minutes mad at me in a good day. Now, you know the law of karma about traffic lights and being late. Are you familiar with that law of karma? If there are 6 traffic lights and you're 12 minutes late, how many traffic lights are going to be red? What's the math? 6. 8. 8 out of 6. Yeah. So you pull up, you know, and your normal tendency as an alpha is to kind of rev it up and get mad and stroke out and, you know, take your nitroglycerin, you know. Or you can go, all right, I'm sitting here, I got a red light, I was 12 minutes late, now I'm 14. So they're going to be 14 minutes angry at me. Oh well. Go to the next block. Huh. It was 14, now what is it? It's 16. They're going to be really mad. Oh well. 18. And then you get there and you apologize and they hate you and you say, I know it's on my fault and no excuses, and then you get over and you move on. Oh well is kind of the reset button to reality. So you keep your goals, you keep your mojo, you keep your challenge, but you say, sometimes reality is bigger than me, oh well, and you're not fighting it. So grief is your friend, and it will help you succeed at higher levels. Any questions about this? Because it always lends itself to questions because it's such a counterintuitive process for business. How many times can you say, oh well? I'm a daily oh well person. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You've pretty much covered how to deal with it internally, you know, but how about externally? People that maybe are in your life that are affected by you or what they're doing is affecting you. How do you reconcile with them?
Either that I'm letting them down or they're letting me down.
Right.
Well, the Bible calls that reconciliation. And reconciliation is where I own, you know, the beam in my eye and I say, let's take the board meeting. You know what? I wasted you guys' time and I'm really sorry and I'll make it up any way I can. And they can either accept it or not, but you've kind of gone the second and third mile. So reconciliation is the relational part of forgiveness and grief, which is the internal part.
But you got to let the part you're holding on to go first, right?
Every time. Even if they don't respond. Our duty is always to own reality and, as Drucker would say, clarify reality and be the humble one, even if they don't accept it. It's kind of funny when you look at Matthew 5 and Matthew 18. You know, in 5 it says, if you're giving your gift to the altar and your brother is mad at you, you drop your gift and go reconcile, right? And 18 it says, if your brother sins against you, what do? Okay, so if it's my fault, who makes the first move? If it's his fault, who makes the first move? Get it? That's the life. Is I still take the initiative because God takes initiative and a CEO takes initiative. Whoever's fault it is, it doesn't matter to me. I want to fix this. I will take the first move. Always be the initiative taker. Don't wait for them to get it and call you. That's a losing position. I want to ask you guys kind of an open-ended thought question first. And that has been either in you being a CEO or you being under a CEO, have expectations ever threatened to wreck you? The worst kind of expectations that were too high, weren't realistic, beat you up, discouraged you. Has anybody ever had the experience of expectation problem? Somebody share a 30-second story. I have a friend who had an expectation problem.
I'll do one. So mine was a leader who the only answer that was the right answer was always his answer. So no matter what my answer was, it was never good enough or right enough or perfect enough or in alignment enough with his answer. And I had to keep going back to do it over again until I presented what he wanted the first time.
Sort of like his answer is always 2 + 2 is 5 and make it work.
Yes.
Yeah, that kind of guy. Right. That's just kind of a way for things not to work. Yes, sir.
For example?
Yeah.
I have such high expectations of others, so I can bring on a direct report or a director level position and over time spin out the relationship because my expectations aren't met, that maybe weren't tied into reality. Or
Right.
then I tend to stop any type of communication
What's your name?
Tim.
Tim, that was like one of the most vulnerable things I've ever heard a CEO say in public. Thank you.
I've read a lot of yours in Henry's books.
Well, thank you. I mean,
It's cost me a lot of money.
well,
I earned it, brother.
but for a guy to get that and know that that's a disconnect in your own head and stuff, there's so much hope. So, way to go. Great story.
But it's still going on to varying degrees, so that's, I'm here instead of the hiring seminar.
Well,
They'll have some actionables.
our goal by the end of this hour is that you'll have such low expectations you'll be so. We'll all just go to the pool and just get a massage and it'll be, you know.
Well, that's what Bob said. He said, I hope you don't expect it.
Okay, all right, here's my story. I remember my perfectionistic boss days myself. And I remember going to the bookkeeper who was new, and she was a young gal and smart, but I think I was kind of intimidating. I don't know if you've ever been that. But I didn't think I was. I think I thought I had sort of normal standards, you know. And so I would go ask her for numbers, you know, cash flow, P&L, you know, how's things going. But I don't think I did it in a real caring way. I just was clueless. And I knew that she was sort of insecure in her job anyway, but I figured, well, suck it up, you know, be a big girl. And so my problem was that every time I asked her for numbers, I got bizarre numbers. Because 2 days later, I'd come in and the next numbers would be way off, and I'm like, no, our trend lines aren't, you know, our trend lines are like this, but they're not like this. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I finally sat down and said, this really isn't making sense. Can we drill down a little bit, like, where are you getting these numbers? And she goes, okay, I fess, I've been making up the numbers. And I went, okay, well, I don't feel crazy now. Why are you making up the numbers? She says, because I'm so scared of you. And there was this bad combination of her sort of being a rookie anyway and kind of new, and me not having a good bedside manner, that she was just coming up with stuff to make me go away. And so I had to look at the whole, what am I expecting of you problem, and that sort of led to a lot of the thinking that I've done and the writing I've done along the line. So, having said that, that was my confession. My question for you is, since we all have to have expectations, all of you guys have some kind of procedure or protocol in determining, let's say, annual expectations. You know, what do we want for calendar year 2010? What is your normal procedure for setting out your expectations? We all have, everybody's got a protocol. What's yours? Okay, flip a coin. All right, what else do you have besides flip a coin? Extrapolation from, I look at trends, I do the analytics. Okay, good. I look at trends. What else?
We're a sales organization, so each producer sets their goals, and then we round them up.
So, sales organization, boost the goals, and then kind of figure out how do we get there. Good. What else? Everybody's got a different way of doing this.
I'm struggling now because we used to have all those procedures. Look at the trends, project it out. We were always within 5 or 6% of it. It was perfect, but in October 08, my crystal ball fell off the shelf and broke.
Did you hear what he said?
I don't have a clue.
1008, the paradigm shifted, and now a lot of trends from the past have no meaning because we don't know the new paradigm yet. You know, industry spending billions of dollars trying to figure out what the new paradigm is, but we don't know. So, what use are they?
My team's asking, what are our goals for 2010? And they're expecting numbers. And my response to them is,
Yeah, yeah,
that's our goal. Our goal is to be here when this year ends.
yeah. Doors open. Yeah. What I want to do then is to take the fact that we need goals and we need expectations and to present a little bit about that in terms of an organizational view, but then I want to drill down into the personal view because I want to talk about the things that will really make or break your ability to have good expectations, which is us, something in our character. So first let's do the way it should be, and then we'll do why things inside us keep it from that, and hopefully you'll come out with some real good skill sets on how to have the right kind of expectations that work for you, all right? So, the first thing is I want to talk about what is the role of expectations. Why do you have them? Bob used to have them, but why do we talk about goals, projections? I mean, what is the value of having them in the first place? Control, very good. I can control some way to focus my life. What else?
Well, you're never going to know if you've gotten there if you don't know where you were going.
If I don't know where I'm going, I'll never know if I got to the goal because there's no goal. Good. Direction.
It offsets fear of the unknown.
Offsets fear of the unknown. There's sort of a give me a light in the darkness kind of function. Yeah, organizationally, the main kind of like realities of why we even do something like this is because we have to know how to allocate resource. How do I know how much money to spend, how much manpower to spend, how much time to spend in R&D and how much time to whatever. How do I know in the pie chart of all my resources and assets, do I know where to put them if I don't have goals and expectations? And the second one is to be able to measure and evaluate success and failure. In other words, kind of like what you said, Susan, if I don't have a sense of what success or failure is, I could be throwing money down a hole and not know it, and not know when it's time to to draw in the troops and say that's it. On the other hand, on the happy end of it, I may not know that we're having a great success and be not allocating enough resource to that. So even though expectations and goals sometimes seem arbitrary or kind of like, okay, in the dark, they're better than not having them because they do give us some kind of a benchmark. And there's always going to be some kind of play percentage-wise in how accurate they are. And I wouldn't worry about that because having some is better than none. You can always, as anybody who's been in business a long time, you can always fine-tune them as you get more information from your analytics and all that. Okay? But that's why we do them. Let me talk a little bit about what, in terms of expectations, the benchmarks people have. Let me just give you normal in terms of what the most standards are. I mean, the top standard would be a thing called perfection. How many of you are familiar with Six Sigma? Okay. How close to perfection is Six Sigma's goal? Keep going. There's some mathematical goal they have, which is a percentage of a percentage of a percentage where there are no mistakes per million kind of iterations. They're trying to get as close mathematically as possible. And nobody will ever get there. Keep going. But nobody be unhappy with perfection. Now there's something under perfection. Which is excellence. Excellence means we have errors and problems, but we're doing pretty well. Who knows what's under excellence? If you're a perfectionist, you're going to say absolute failure, but we're going to be talking about that in a minute. Yeah, what I would just say is somewhere in the good enough range. And this is where CEOs start to kind of like miss the ball because a lot of CEOs don't have a good enough channel in your heads. Like Bob said, our goal is to keep the doors open. These days we need a good enough in our minds. And then finally, there's a not good enough, which would be failure or something's majorly wrong or we've got to change some real directions in asset allocation or focus or vision or whatever. And if you go through any kind of organizational paradigm, it's going to be some kind of combination of these four. 100%, really, really good, okay, not exciting, and not good enough. Now, if you have a struggle in too high expectations, which in my experience with CEOs, it's only about 95% of you,